All right. Thank you. So getting started, I wanted to start off by the New York Black Librarians Caucus presents Conversations from the Heart, our fourth session discussing microaggressions. Today we have a wonderful panel and an amazing conversation planned. But before that, I would like to say a few things. Right now I am supposed to tell you all about membership, about scholarships, but I'm actually going to say something else. So, as a Black woman, I've always had to go out of my way to find people and spaces that made me feel wholly represented and supported. In undergrad, I left a PWI and transferred to Spelman College in HBCU. And in grad school, I befriended women of color and joined the New York Black Librarians Caucus. Admittedly, I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never worked in a library. In fact, I spent very little time in libraries. But it didn't matter. The caucus opened their arms and embraced me. They saw something in me. Specifically, Sandra Michelle saw something in me. Since I've met Michelle, she's helped me receive 2 scholarships. She's helped me complete my thesis on cultural competency. She took me to my very first library conference. She advocated for me to hold leadership roles. She's written endless letters of recommendation on my behalf. And even now, since she's still not done pushing me and supporting me, she is single-handedly the most dependable person in my professional life. She is both my mentor and my friend. Now, I need you all to understand that I am not unique. Michelle is. I know that she has offered and continues to offer her tools, her knowledge, and her support to anyone who asks for it. And she never asks for a single thing in return. Her only genuine wish and intention is to make individuals better, because these individuals are the ones who will step into librarianship and make an impact. With confidence, I can say that Sandra Michelle's impact in the field of librarianship goes far beyond her own direct accomplishments. She's played a role in the growth, success, and accomplishments of so many others. But let's take a minute to talk about some of her accomplishments. Committed to adult education, Sandra Michelle is an adjunct professor for several colleges and universities, while simultaneously offering herself as a coach and a mentor to several students and librarians. She is the immediate past president of the New York Black Librarians Caucus and an active member of the New York Librarian Association and BCILA. As a contributing member, she continuously uplifts library and information services through committee work, such as fundraising, as well as through presenting. When she's not presenting, doing committee work, or holding class, she's writing relevant articles for publication. In recent years, she's hosted dozens of conference presentations around the country and has had several articles published. She even helped co-write a chapter in the publication, The 21st Century Black Librarian in America, Issues and Challenges by Andrew Jackson. Overall, the work that she manages to accomplish, despite the struggles that come with being a Black woman in a majority white space, is nothing short of impressive. Today, I would like to extend my appreciation and gratitude to Sandra Michelle Eccles, our moderator for today, and more importantly, the recipient of the 2020 New York Library Association Outstanding Service to Libraries Award, for your sustained contribution to the development, promulgation, and growth of library information services to the people of New York State. Congratulations, Michelle. It is my privilege and honor to share this moment with you. So many of us are great because you believed we could be, because you've invested in us. Congratulations once again, and I will now pass it over to our moderator for today, Michelle.
Okay, how am I supposed to speak behind that, Rebecca? You literally have tears rolling down my eyes. Good morning, everyone. I'm so grateful and shocked all at the same time. A lot of emotions are going on right now, but I got to pull it together because you know what? We're fabulous, but we have a great presentation for you guys. I have my esteemed colleagues here with me to talk about this topic, microaggressions. I would like to introduce my esteemed colleagues, and you guys are going to have to jump in because right now I'm really choked up. So I'm just going to ask you ladies to please introduce yourselves while I try to get my daughter to bring me some tissue because I'm like literally choked up. Can you ladies start by introducing yourselves while I pull it together? I need a minute. I'm so excited. And thank you, Rebecca, so much for that lovely um, introduction speech. I'm just like in awe. And thank you to my colleagues all around the state. And thank you to my NYBLC family. I love you all dearly. I'm always here for you. And I'm glad that you guys are here for me as well. And I have to give my shout out to the person who pushed me to be the very best president that I was at NYBLC. And that is Mrs. Phyllis Mack. Thank you, Mrs. Mack, for always pushing me, always pulling my ears, as I would say my mother would do for me, and just stepping in and showing up for me at all times. And thank you, Miss Aletta, too, as well, for your support. And yeah. All right, ladies, we're going to be here because I'm crying now and I got to get my son to bring me some tissue. But can you start off by introducing yourselves, Dr. Walker, and then we'll just go on from everyone else here.
Sure. So my name is Chandra Walker. I am the interim.
Next, Amma.
Thank you so much. My name is Amma Yawson, and I am the founder and president of an organization called Miles Tales Publishing and Training and Development. The organization provides books, assemblies, enrichment programs, and professional development sessions to schools, universities, and corporations through a network of artists and thought leaders. And my specialty is diversity and inclusion.
Ebony.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Ebony Henry with an I. I am a school media specialist for DC Public Schools, and I'm also an executive board member for ALA, and that's all I will say. And moving on to Miss Casey Boyd.
Good morning. I'm Casey Boyd. I'm a library media specialist at Jefferson Academy, and that is a middle school located in Washington, D.C.
Okay, welcome to everyone. Just in case, I'm going to read a definition about microaggression and then I'll jump into the questions. Microaggression is a term used for brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, or environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative, prejudicial slights and insults towards any group, particularly culturally marginalized group. Back in 1970s, Harvard University professor Chester M. Pierce coined the term microaggression to describe the insults and slights he had witnessed against Black people. For an essence of time, I'm going to stop there, and then I'm just going to get into asking the questions to our panel. So panelists, the first question I have for you is, as expressed in the opening slide, microaggression appears in three forms, which I stated already: microassault, microinsult, microinvalidation. What are some examples of the nuances between these different forms, and how are they perpetrated? So we're doing this as round robin, so one person start and the next person can continue.
Great, I can start. So a microassault sounds like what it is: a assault, which would not be considered a physical assault by the sort of legal definition of assault. However, it has an emotional impact. To make this very clear to you, if you've ever experienced someone saying something to you about your race, your gender, your ethnicity, your religion, that felt like a gut punch, that's what a microassault feels like. So if I were to go to work and I would see a noose on my table, that would be like a gut punch. Why? Because although no one has actually hung me with a noose, the symbolism of the noose is as if I am being hung by a noose. Or if I were to walk outside my house and see a cross burning, no one has actually burned me, but the symbol of it is one that is intimidating. I'll give another example of what I would consider a microassault that happened to me not so long ago. I went to go register my 2 Black boys for my school district out on Long Island, and the registrar had a Blue Lives Matter band on her wrist. And it felt like a punch to me. It's like, I'm coming here to entrust these beautiful Black boys to you in the era of police brutality and Black Lives Matter, and you're wearing this band, which to you may just represent your support for the police, because of course, and I support wonderful, good police as well, but to me represents a rebuke of the Black Lives Matter movement, because it didn't require any response. I say Black Lives Matter, you don't need to tell me all lives matter, you don't need to tell me blue lives matter, Black Lives Matter. So that's just to give you an idea of a micro assault. It is like a gut punch. It is a word, a phrase, a symbol that is intimidating, although not a physical, although no physical harm has been done. So I'll just start with that first definition, and I'll let some of the other panelists tackle the rest of it.
I'll chime in really quickly. I think the nuances among the different types of microaggressions relate to the intent, as well as to, I guess, if it's conscious or unconscious, and then if it's systematic or if it's directed towards a particular individual. I believe that regardless of whether it's intentional or unconscious or conscious, or, you know, if it's a physical assault, the impact is still great. And that's the thing that people don't understand. And I think that's where the education becomes really important. It doesn't matter if you didn't intend it. It doesn't matter if you didn't physically strike me. What it does to me on the inside as a person is what really matters. And that's what we're trying to address.
I can jump in. I can talk about micro insults. And as a woman of color, experience this constantly. I'm minding my own business, walking around in the store. I'm just browsing, looking around, and I'm followed. And those micro insults, they're spur of the moment. They're backhanded. It's really hard to tell if the perpetrator is like kind of aware that they're really, you know, what they're doing is insulting. In their mindset, they're thinking, oh, this is my job. But the moment a Black person walks through the door and automatically you're following them, that's very much so problematic. So that's my example of a micro insult. I experience that all the time. I'm a Black woman. I have dreadlocks. And so automatically I'm deemed as something negative.
And I can actually chime in on that. Just what Casey said, this same thing happened to me literally 3 hours ago. I'm in Deep Creek, Maryland right now, which is a very nice lakeside place. And even driving up here, there's signs on people's door, you know, properties saying Trump and all these type of things. And like you said, Blue Lives Matter. So I already know where I'm at and what I need to do. But 4 of us Black women, educated Black women, went to Walmart this morning, and one of the girls was noticing that like they were following us. And even when we went to self-checkout, they made it, you know, known to be like, oh, do you need help? You didn't ask any of these other white people if they needed help checking out. Do you think this is the first time I ever been to a Walmart before? We got Walmarts at home. So it's things like that, like Casey has said, and also touching on micro invalidation. You know, I've been at an ALA conference, not looking like a server, but been handed a plate when someone has been finished, as to say, I can't possibly be a librarian, so I must be the help. I must work here. And another example, not to like give somebody else's business, but I was in a room with our president of American Library Association now, Julius C. Jefferson Jr., and he had on a suit, and this lady literally handed him her plate. And I was just, I mean, to me, it's definitely an insult. It definitely, you know, micro-validate, it's everything. I mean, I just could not believe in a room of educated Black people that this white librarian just couldn't, she just thought like, oh, he got a suit on and let me hand him this plate, as if to say he just can't have a suit on because he know how to dress and come to a conference, you know, so.
Wow. That is a mouthful, a handful, and a basketful going on right now here today. I won't even talk about, like, I'm shocked over my award, but it is validation of the hard work that I have done. And I have been on the hand of microaggression in this field of librarianship. And I just hope that this panel and this discussion will call attention to it, and that individuals will understand that maybe some things are not done blatantly. I mean, they may feel like it's not blatant, or they may feel like it's okay and everyone's just very comfortable. And just go on and just decide on like that we're going to do better, right? Everyone wants to do better, adding on to just the life, the world that we constantly live in. So I have the next question for my panel is, how can people of color fight back against microaggressions in the workplace without being considered aggressive by their white colleagues and administrators? That's a tough one, ladies. That's a tough one because I've been on the other end of it. So I'm going to go to Casey Boyd, and I want Casey to answer that one first.
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you. This is what I do. I take the policy and procedure manual, regardless of wherever I'm working, and I'm already staying on the up and up anyway as an employee. But I take their policy and procedure manual and I throw their words right back at them. And that's how you fight that. Because in my mindset, I have been called the angry Black woman on my job. And in being called that name, when I start to dissect that, I was called that, I was called rude and unprofessional and was threatened with a write-up. And it was because I had a coworker who was trying to coerce me into doing some work outside of my job responsibility. And because I spoke up and said to my principal at the time, would you please tell her to stop? You know, this is unfair treatment. I should not be harassed. I'm looking at my job description as written by the district, and I'm supposed to do this, 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 and this. But because I spoke up, I was called that angry Black woman, and I was threatened with a write-up. I went right back to policy and procedure with the union contract, and I said, now, explain what the justification in terms of why are you going to write me up based off of me communicating with you in email that there is a problem with this coworker. And the issue went null and void. But it was a verbal threat. Well, that if this continues, I'm going to write you up. And then I told him verbally and also went back in email and said, and I will follow the same policy and procedure that I'm following right here. So you have to fight back with the words that are written within your organization. And when you call folks on that, that generally stops them in their tracks.
Well said, Casey. Well said. I totally agree with you. Anyone else on the panel want to chime in on that one as well?
I can. Being a woman from New York City, my last job, which is my current job right now, when I went to the interview, because I felt like I'm in Washington, D.C., so I already, sorry for anybody from D.C., but I just feel like they're real sensitive. And anyone, from New York, Chicago, that's why me and Casey get along so well. We kind of have this edge about us. And I guess, all my career, I've been told my tone. And I'm like, I'm just talking. You're probably being a little too sensitive. And in my last job, working for DC Public Library, I always came across someone questioning, the way I may say something. And then I knew, why they would put me in a certain location, because they knew I knew how to deal with the community. Or you give me a particular staff member because that, anybody who talks to me longer than 5 minutes know that I'm not your average librarian. I got a little edge about me. And so I noticed they would, have me say, oh, can you talk to this person? Because they know I'm a follow, like Casey said, you're going to follow those union guidelines and policies and stuff like that. But you know exactly what to say to do what you need to do. And I feel like, yes, it's a problem that comes on over and over in my career, but it's not my problem. It's your problem. And I just feel like if you are looking at a strong person, and then the fact that it's coming from a Black woman, then there's an issue. So at my interview for DC Public Schools, I let them know, please do not be offended when I say something. I'm from New York. I have to use that as my disclaimer. I'm sorry, but my tone is going to be a little different for y'all out here. And it's not that I'm being mean. It is not that I'm being nasty. I'm just saying what I need to say in the way I need to say it for you to understand me. And the good thing is, it was at least 3 other people in there from New York too. So I got a lot of high fives, and it was like, okay. And we stick together pretty good in the building. But I mean, you just got to be yourself. And if you have to put it out there, then you put it out there. But one thing for sure, and 2 things for certain, I'm never going to change me.
That's
Well
right.
said, ladies. Well said, ladies. Yes. We have a question from one of the panelists that I want to get into, unless one of you other ladies want to talk about this question as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, sorry to interrupt, Chandra. I wanted to add that potentially you should ask a question if you have the presence of mind. I am not going to, and I'm going to admit this, although I'm steeped in this work as a diversity educator and consultant, very often it is very hard, and this is why I try to meditate every day and I incorporate mindfulness into my programs. It is very hard to think of what to do in the moment because the pain is so fresh, the shock is so fresh. But if you are able to develop and cultivate that presence of mind, someone hands you a plate and you say, excuse me, why are you handing me a plate? I don't have a name badge on. I'm not dressed in the waiter's uniform. Why are you handing this to me? And the person will very often be shocked and will have to confront his or her own stereotyping by saying, oh my goodness, you are right. You don't have a name tag. You don't have any hit or sign that you are wait staff. Why exactly is it that I assume that this person is a wait staff in this area? So I think one, just asking the question in the moment, if you have the presence of mind to do so, and no shame if you do not, because this is exceedingly challenging. Additionally, I certainly agree with the thought process of going to your policy and procedures and escalating it in your organization, actually stating it and making sure that the higher ups, the people in HR or wherever, know exactly what is going on. Additionally, very often, even if you didn't have the presence of mind, or you do not believe that you at this point want to go to HR, you can also have a conversation with the person afterwards. I believe that getting ourselves out of this hole of both systemic racism and unconscious bias rearing their ugly heads in our culture and society is really going to require bold conversations, bold requests, and an unveiling to a certain extent of our vulnerability and being able to speak to people and say, this caught me off guard. This made me feel uncomfortable. This hurt me. I'm new to the, American Librarian Association conference, and it felt very unwelcoming to have people consistently handing me plates, despite the fact that I've worked so hard in attaining my master's in library studies or what have you. So those are 3 tips that I would want to point out.
Really quick.
You have those 3 tips? Go ahead, Dr. Walker.
Really quick, I just want to chime in and say that in my experience with microaggressions, very often there's a power differential. So it's not, sometimes they can be with your colleagues or your peers, but a lot of times it could be a supervisor or it could be someone who's up higher on the food chain. And so you have to negotiate those dynamics as you try to come up with your response. I would also say that, we've almost talked about some tips and we talked about some different types of responses, but these situations are highly contextual and they're going to be individualized for people. And, don't feel bad if you cannot come up with that response immediately. But as she said, you may need some time to process to address that particular issue. One of the microaggressions that I have frequently gotten has been around my hair. So I have worn my natural hair for the past 6 years. It's a very personal decision. I love my hair. I love its texture, its unpredictability. I love it. But I found like on the occasion that I might press my hair out, like to cut it like once a year, my colleagues are like, oh, we love your hair. Your hair looks so nice. And I'm just thinking like, I'm going to wet it tomorrow so that it will curl back up. I think that as librarians, we have a lot of opportunities and there are various responses to microaggressions as well as systematic racism in our profession. I think one of the things that I particularly enjoy is forums like this, where you have an opportunity to speak your truth. I appreciate being able to speak my truth through my scholarship. You may look at me and think that you got away with talking to me or dealing with me in a particular way, but if you go and you read what I write, I'm going to respond to you. and I'm going to give you some information that you need. And so I think, again, don't feel bad if you're in that moment, you don't have the words to respond. There's a variety of different ways that we can respond to this type of aggression in our profession.
Yes, 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 yes. That is so true. In our writing, in presentations, in forums like this, and just, presenting, it's definitely. And I want to add to it about the hair girl. Hair is an accessory, not a necessity. That's my tagline. That's what I tell people. It is an accessory, not a necessity. And so we have this great question, and this has to go back to something Amma said earlier. Why is a noose micro? It seems more like blatant, outright aggression.
I think, thank you so much for asking that, because I think the recent case of the NASCAR driver, kind of, if all of you have heard, there was a NASCAR driver, I believe his first name is Buddy, or his nickname is Buddy, who a noose was found in his area. And there was some debate surrounding it as to whether it was a noose and meant to be racially intimidating, or whether it was indeed just a garage pull. And there's ongoing debate about this. And I think that is what distinguishes it. For many of us, there's no need for debate, right? And we think that this is clear. But this is why we say unconscious bias and microaggressions are so different. Unlike 60, 70 years ago, where there were rules that said whites only, coloreds only, things were in print, they were clear, there was no potential for debate because they were codified by law. We are in a new era now, where very often things are seen as murky, or they are argued to be murky, even if some of us do not think it's murky. And so that is why we would say if anyone hung a Black person by a noose and they were hanging from a tree, there was a sign saying "We S's," this would be a hate crime and it would be clear. But when the garage pull or the noose just winds up on your desk, sadly there's debate. And that's what we're making that distinguish. We're distinguishing the codified, the no debate, from the more quote unquote ambiguous to some in our society. Does that answer your question, please? Bubba, not Buddy, Bubba. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well said, well said. Yes, I believe that answers the question for the panel, for the person who asked the question. I have a question for all the panelists. Lori asks, what is it about documenting behaviors? I know you touched on it, Casey, when you talked about, going back to policies and procedures. I would first start off saying is that I always keep a fact file, because you know what? What's going to happen when you come for me? I'm gonna pull out the paper, and I'm gonna have my fact file with the date, the time, the person's name, and an infraction. What I do is I journal a lot, and I keep a journal with me at all times, and then I'll go home and type up my fact file. I don't keep my fact file on the company's computer. It's fresh in my mind, and I'm a writer, so I would just write it down first and put it in my journal. When I go home on my own personal computer, fact file on XYZ, fact file on XYZ, because in a given moment when I need to go to the policies and procedures, no one will ever have to say to me, that's not true. Where did you come up with that? Oh yeah, let's look at paragraph number XYZ, and this is the documentation to back it up. So my panelists, what do you have to say about that question?
Look, paper calls for paper, okay? My career first started in corporate America, at a Fortune 500 company. And I had a problem with a manager at the time. Went into an arbitration meeting because, of course, there wasn't or I should say a hearing, because this particular company did not have a union, and got out-argued. I learned from that experience, which was I had the most important tool sitting in front of me, which was the computer. So from that point on, and then when I moved into education as a school librarian, whenever there's something that happens that's kind of crazy, off the cuff, or a bad experience with a principal or coworker, I send an email to myself, or either I will blind copy a generic email address that I have, where I just dump all of these emails, and that's how I keep a record of what's taking place. Because when it comes to it and something really blows up out of control, and if a union representative or a lawyer wants to ask you questions, you have your documentation right there, and it won't be overwhelming. The only thing you have to do is search for what you need. So yes, documentation is important. You have to get in the practice of doing it. And here's the thing, I always hear this, I ain't got time for that. That's too much time. Look, that could stand between you having a job, you winning the case, you overcoming a serious problem on your job. So you have to learn to incorporate that into your daily practice.
I totally agree with Casey. My first location job was actually working in a unionized public library. And then the idea of moving up to a manager. But the great thing is I was a shop steward. And so, like I said earlier, a lot of times they placed me in locations where there were problematic staff, but they knew that I knew the union contract. So they knew that I knew how to write somebody up, properly, that the letters don't go back and then the staff member still continues on. And so I learned that, working in the public library, about documenting anything, whether it's on a staff member to write them up because you're on the manager side, or even as a staff member who's in the hostile work environment, you feeling some type of way. I didn't even realize until my first sexual harassment class that, women get harassed all the time. And I want to say, go out there and say African American women get harassed all the time, from, a young age up until, the day that we die, and didn't realize there's certain, microaggressions that men may have been saying to you, was sexual harassment. I mean, I sat in the whole, watching the video laughing, because I was just like, wow, that happened to 10-year-old girls in the hood, and we don't know. And we have adapted, to something like that.
All right. Anyone else want to make a comment? Or I'll move on to our next question from the panelists. All right. So the next question that one of someone asked, Amelia, sorry, what would be the most helpful thing for a white ally to do if they notice microaggression?
Speak up. If you notice something, what is it? See something, do something. That's what the hashtag is at the train stations in DC, and I guess New York too. I mean, it's a wonderful thing when someone sees something. A lot of times, when I was asked to do the panel, I had to think, have I really been experienced personally a lot of microaggression? And sometimes I have. It flies over my head, because I just want to believe that people are not that ignorant and they're not thinking that way. And so I don't even realize what's going on until somebody else say, I felt uncomfortable, Ebony, that this person has said something, either you or I can say something. And that's like, one of those, like we like to say, woke white people who, feel some type of, they understand our struggle, and, then read some books. And it's like, if you see something, do something. And then also, if the person that it's been done to, you can confront them and say, I heard what was said. If you need my support and write anything up, then, I'm here for you, because that was ridiculous. That made no sense. And I'm sorry if you're feeling some type of way, but don't think that, everybody thinks this way. Become an ally.
Yes, become an ally. Yes. Dr. Walker.
I would just add to that, like, much of what Ebony said, use your privilege. Like, if you have a common identification with that person who's the offender, and also a lot of times it's helpful to do it publicly. So when it happened publicly, there needs to be a public correction, and use that privilege, that protection that you have, to stand in the gap for marginalized people. I was just reading something the other day that talked about how, you may experience someone being mistreated, and then after the fact, you come to them and you tell them, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I know that must have felt badly. And it's like, okay, where were you? You were there, you saw this. Why didn't you step in? That's what we need. That's what we're looking for. And that's a way that you can really step in and, again, stand in that gap for us and intercede on our behalf.
I would agree. I would say I certainly agree with the idea that you're affirming the victim, as well as advocating for that person and being willing to be a witness. But I also want to say this: all of us can be victims, and all of us can be perpetrators of microaggressions. Unfortunately, I mean, this is part of the reason why I'm so interested and proud of being an artist. We have a collective understanding of what it means to be any sort of person in this society. Unfortunately, there's a collective understanding about what masculinity is, what femininity is, what it means to be Black, Asian, Hispanic. There are stereotypes that all of us have been taught and that society has been inculcated with for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And so, yes, if you notice something, we want you to affirm the victim and to advocate on the victim's behalf, but also recognize that all of us can be a perpetrator. And if you're a perpetrator, apologize and say, I'm sorry, this was my mistake. This was not my intention. I engage in microaggressions all the time. I'll give you examples. One example that I often give in my trainings is that I was working at a law firm and one of my colleagues said, oh, I'm getting married in 6 months. And I got so excited. It was a male colleague. And I said, oh my goodness, tell me who the lucky lady is. He wasn't marrying a lady. He was marrying a man, right? But unfortunately, I've been inculcated for many years, and I'm unraveling this, that when a man tells me he's getting married, it's a woman that he's marrying. So that is a microaggression surrounding sexual orientation that I engaged in. And so I said, I apologize, even better. Tell me about the lucky man. That was my response. So please, let's be open about it and recognize that we are both victims and perpetrators at the same time.
Well said, panelists, well said. So my next question is, research has shown that microaggression takes a real psychological toll on the mental health of their recipients and can lower work productivities. What do the panelists recommend people of color do to heal in a work environment that has inflicted this kind of psychological damage? Well, I'm gonna tell you, coming from a deep Southern rural family, my grandmother, no one ever talked about actually going to therapy, and it has been taboo in the Black community for so long. Yes, take it to the Lord in prayer, but get yourself a good therapist, accountability coach, and I'm sure the panelist has a lot of great things to say about this, but I'm here to say that I can talk my truth and stand in my truth, as I always do. When I tell people that I had to go to therapy behind 2 of the positions that I had in libraries, they actually looked at me and said, what, you? Why you? Yes, PTSD is something, because something happened to me as a child, and what happened to me as a child when I endured the microaggression, it hit triggers, and so I had to deal with it. And so just want to say, yes, seek out therapy, seek out the help. Somebody put in the chat, there's a better one called gin and tonic every day. I'm just crying. Panelists, please answer.
Oh boy. I guess I can start off, and I would say white Hennessy, but we're gonna keep it 100 here. Okay, so to be serious, yes, faith is what drives me. Having people in my life. Rebecca was talking about how you are her, Michelle is her mentor. I have several mentors that help me in different aspects of my life, the job, dealing with just day-to-day life, a spiritual mentor. You know, these are these sister girls that help me when I have those periods of time where I get really frustrated and I just want to throw something against the wall. The next thing is how important it is to continue to read and draw inspiration from people who have written things. I go back to something that is it's a very old book and it's always overlooked. Chaos of Community, Where Do We Go From Here? It's by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You know, there's a lot of great points in there that he talks about the fight, the struggle. And I look at the struggle that he had, I kind of look at it in the sense of what we're experiencing in school libraries. You know, we're getting beat up really bad. And not just in DC, but across the country in large cities. And you have to draw inspiration from something, you know. And so I look at the writings of different people and then also what people stood for. The late John Lewis, I heard him speak a couple of years ago. He talked about good trouble. I hope my internet is not about to go out because I just got a little simple. Okay, so I'm going to continue on. He talked about good trouble. I started using that that hashtag. And it's like, that is what helps me, continues to drive my practice. Now, because, folks think that I'm so outspoken and nobody's going to come for me. Yes, they do. They come for me big time. Even coworkers, they're like, whatever, what you got to say. But I have to remain positive, and I have to keep those important people in my life, because I have the times when I get really frustrated and I get to cussing and clowning and everything, and I don't want to even go in that direction, because it's hard to get me back. I'm from the south side of Chicago, for crying out loud, and I could go there. But you have to have those means in place.
And I definitely want to co-sign what Casey is saying. I tell people all the time, like, I'm not in my faith walk, and I'm also not there in my professional walk, because I'm from East East Harlem, New York, and I stay ready. And so, like Casey said, I've been in situations where, I've grabbed my keys and gotten in my car because I was going to the job to say some things to some people who, felt like, they could talk to me any kind of way in an email. And thank God my mom was there and was like, no, you're not going to lose your job over this one, clown or whatever. But having a mentor is so important. Multiple mentors, because you may call, if you got one, you call them, they're not available. So you always going to have somebody who can talk you off the ledge, who can talk you through the situation, who's possibly been through the same thing, and can say, look, this is what I have done when I've done, when this has happened to me. The wonderful thing about, being a Black librarian, and I got my library degree from Clark Atlanta University. So that is in the South. And we had some great teachers. We have some great alumni from that school that can always be, a helping hand. But the great other thing, like you talked about earlier, Michelle, about counseling. I work for DC government. DC government provides us and their, staff members with a counseling service for free. And so when a student felt like she could put her hands on me earlier this year, and my mind was like, choke her out, but my spirit said, this child needs help. And to not feel like I had got support from administration. And so like 5 hours later, and the police are there, I called, what we call Enova, and told them the situation. So it could be, like we talked about last question, documented. Because like you said, PTSD, when I see that student 3 weeks later smirking because she didn't get suspended, I don't know what my mind may do, but it's documented somewhere that I was very upset this day, and this is how I was feeling, and it's not my fault,
Wow. That
Wow,
was
I
a
would
loaded
agree
one.
with that. I would also say, like, as we're coming up with our, toolkit for dealing with microaggressions, and I feel as if like my whole existence is like one microaggression after another, unfortunately. But I would say 3 tools. I completely agree with what Michelle said about therapy. Of course, mindfulness, deep breathing, meditation, yoga, writing, reflection, journaling. Journaling has been proven to help people with mental health because it allows us to develop some distance between like ourselves and the traumatic experience. But I would also add this one to this list that we've created here, and that is creating an affirming culture through community. So, as a Black woman, a dark-skinned woman, a kinky-haired woman, an African, of immediate African descent woman, like for me, that has always been key for me. Like developing a community of people who affirm me and see me in my wholeness, who see my beauty, who validate dark skin. That's through books. Like I was, an adult and bought like this Naomi Campbell book full of Naomi looking all beautiful. And every time I would see her, I'd be like, oh, if she's hot, then darn, I could potentially be hot too, right? Like you have to validate yourself in that way. When Peter was on the cover of People at the time I was wearing my hair short, I got that magazine and I was like, oh, please, you might as well say we're twins now. Like you have to, through your books, through your music, through your community, through other people, develop that community of people who truly see you in all your beauty and your holistic brilliance. Because unfortunately, sadly, when you go out into the world, sometimes people are not seeing that because of the stereotype. So you need to have people around you who see that, and materials. We're librarians talking here, right? So materials from libraries that do that for you too.
There's a book that I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. I think it's Cardia, put in the chat that says the Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health by Dr. Rita Walker. She highly recommends it as a great book. So with that said, ladies, I have another question for you. You know the questions are coming. How can people of color confront folks who engage in microaggressions against them, especially at work? But oftentimes the people who commit the microaggressions claim their ignorance. Now we kind of touched on this about, when we asked about when I posed the question about allies, but just think about this. I'm going to give you a scenario, and this is a true scenario. So I was working at the College of New Rochelle, and at the College of New Rochelle, they were undergoing a pay cut due to some financial mishaps, as they like to say, that happened. But we all know what happens sometimes with money, right? And I was the last one hired, but what I got, instead of, like, I would have preferred my reduction in salary as being, this is happening because you were the last one hired, right? I would have expected that. But what I received was, and I've told the story often, is that if anyone on my team, well, I'm reducing your salary because I know that if anyone on my team could handle this pay cut, it'll do, because you would go out there and roll up your sleeves and make it happen for yourself. If that was said to you, what would have been your response, and how would you have handled it? I'll tell you my response after, ladies, but I want to hear what the panelists have to say about that.
I would have been like, you damn right, and just left it at that and walked out, said, are we done? I mean, because like I said, some stuff flies over my head. I would have took that as, here's a strong person who I know has skills and has, mentors and has connections and great at networking, that she will find a way. I wouldn't take it the other way, because like I said earlier, some stuff just fly over my head because I can't believe that you think you will talk to me like that. So I gotta be positive and think of it on a positive note and not be negative.
Okay. I see Dr. Walker nod. And what would you have said, Dr. Walker? How would you respond to something like that?
I think a lot of times with microaggressions, if you start asking questions, well, so why do you think that? Let's unpack that. Let's explain that. Let me understand what makes you think that. That can often be very instructive. Maybe not rectifying the behavior that's already being committed, but I think knowing that you will be confronted when you address people in that way in the future may cause them to pause and reflect before they try that again. So again, you cannot be out here just saying and doing anything if you feel like somebody's going to step to you and ask you a question or ask you to explain why exactly you felt it was appropriate to, what about me makes you think that I can go out and, as you say, make it happen. I need help understanding that. Again, it doesn't rectify the behavior in that particular situation, but I think that person would probably think twice before approaching another person in that manner. So that would be my response.
Great. That's because you have that doctorate. Anyway.
And that's why these type of talks are wonderful, because I'm taking notes. So next time if somebody ever came to me and said something like that, I could be a little bit more politically correct.
Correct. Well said. Well said.
And professional. See, I told you I'm not there in my professional walk. So.
All right. Alma, you have something to say?
No, I completely agree. I would turn into questions. I would say, oh, really interesting. You know how we practice mirroring and, when you're in the corporate professional world and how to give feedback sandwiches. I would use all of those tools. Really? So are you saying because I appear to you to be a very industrious person, and to be someone who's very committed to my career and my professional development and my growth and trajectory, that I should rather be penalized for such industriousness by taking a pay cut when I just started this position and I'm doing an excellent job. Is that really what you believe? Now, why would that be? And what message is that sending to other people? I would like literally just keep on asking the questions for the person to recognize how ridiculous what she or he was saying was. I mean, all of us have said crazy things, and all of us have also done this. All of us have also basically penalized the dependable person. Right? It's like if you have a friend who you know you can rely on all of the time, and that person is so good, you call that person more often, while some of your other friends enjoy your barbecues and enjoy your generosity and your love and friendship for free. So I I know that people do that, but I think we need to call them out on it. So I would have been asking all of those questions to say, this is, and do you think that, you know, potentially the fact that I'm a Black woman and Black women have a reputation for being hardworking and creative and get it, do you think that could potentially be informing your perspective? Ask questions, because no one can see, because the question can't be seen as combative, especially when you're saying it in a very diplomatic way, but the person will correct his own behavior.
Well, because my mouth was wide open, you want to say something, Casey, first, and I'll tell you ladies what my response was. Go ahead, Casey.
Okay, because see, that was an ignorant statement. I think we all agree with that. But see, this is where I would get extremely strategic. First of all, let's address the paper situation, the money. First of all, I would go to my union, go to my HR department, or go to I just lost a train of thought on this, like labor board.
Building
you have to have a labor board within your organization, you know, a representative in that respect. I would talk about this differential in pay, okay? Because that money needs to be afforded back to you. And if I'm not mistaken, a lot of these salaries are public information. So you should be able to compare and contrast duties, responsibilities against the salaries and the differential in pay that you're seeing with you and your peers. The next thing I've learned is that when those idiotic comments are made by those type of people in the workplace, it's because for quite some time, and also systemically, the behaviors have never been corrected. So I look at inspiration of late, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Never have we had anyone stand at a podium in Congress and say what she had to say. Now, she had to use some language because she was repeating what was said to her. But see, sometimes outing these knuckleheads with that rhetoric is what needs to be done. And it also calls for you to ask internally, do I want to fight this fight to this level? And when you want to do that, that's a scary platform to be in, because you now risking your finances, your home, your threats to your job. You know, it goes very deep. But I think about the pioneers of the civil rights movement and what they experienced. And this generation, especially, because I just turned 50 this year, we need to work more in correcting our behaviors and be more like our predecessors of years past. So at some point we have to stand up. We have to take a stand. And if you're not there yet, we understand that. But we have to move in that direction in order to see some type of justice that happens, because that should have never happened to you, Michelle. Never.
I know. So my response before we move on was, first I was shocked, mouth was open, and immediately part of Ebony came out, and then part of Dr. Walker came out of me as well. So the part that of Ebony that came out my mouth was, why? Because I'm Black. And then the next thing that came out my mouth was like, this is an injustice. I do not believe that you're actually sitting here saying this to me. So I need you to reflect and think about what you just stated. But long of a story short, it was grant funds. And most of the people who played off the grant funds look like you and I. And so I did not take it to EEOC. I went there and I was getting ready to file the complaint. But I realized if I would have filed a complaint and went through with the complaint, there would have been 20 other families that would have lost their income, because federal government does not play with their money. They would have came in and took all the federal funding from this institution at that time. So what I did do was I became the martyr for the cause. But I did resign, and I had a lovely resignation letter, one sentence. Anyway, next question for you guys. Thank you for commenting on that. I had to put that out there because we are talking about libraries, talking about what goes on in libraries, and people do not believe that librarians actually go through this. This sounds like some stuff that happens in corporate America, right? I've worked corporate America, you've worked corporate America, Casey, but it's people really do not understand that it goes through that in libraries. So Lori has a question is, when is it a time to walk away from a toxic environment? Girl, I did it on 9/11. I walked into her office and said, here you go. Here's my letter of resignation. I've reached an impasse in my career. Effective XYZ day, I will no longer be employed here. That's it. You have to sometimes just step it. You have to look at yourself and look at your finances. This is why I've never lived beyond my means. And when I say live beyond my means, when I was making almost $100,000, I still act like I was earning $50,000. So it was easy for me to walk away from that position. Some people don't know how to walk away because they can't financially, but yes. And Lori says librarians are mean. Oh, no, we're not. Not all of us.
Some of them. You go to enough conferences.
All right, so ladies, the question out there is, when is it time to walk away from a toxic work environment?
Well, I can speak to this because I did it 2 years ago. And so you have to say to yourself, when is enough enough? When your money is right first, when your money right. Because we ain't, some of us is blessed and some of us aren't, things happen. And the economy ain't always what it looked like. But one, when your money is right. Two, when you already know you have the networking. And that's why we have meetings like this. That's why we go to conference, because you have networks. And so for me, when I felt like I can't grow anymore here, I'm tired of explaining every 6 months to my supervisor why ALA is important, and he's not understanding the positions that I hold in the organizations that I'm involved in. How is that helping this organization? If I have to keep explaining that to you every 6 months, then that means you don't get me. It also means you really don't understand the librarianship, because why wouldn't you want to go to conference? Why wouldn't you want to be active in your profession? That when I told people I was going to library school, they were like, you got to get a master's to learn how to put books on the shelf? Like, they think it's a joke, but we're just as big and just as strong as if we were lawyers or doctors. And so just make sure you have that network. So when I decided to leave, I left on a Monday morning and had an interview for DC Public Schools on a Monday afternoon. You know why? Because I had connections that I knew that if I wanted to leave, I could have left. And so when the director of library services at a particular job that can get you an interview, can get you in a job, and that person's been asking you for 2 years to come to the other side, you do what you need to do. You quit, you make sure your money's together, and you go out there and you apply for something else, so you already have something lined up because you've had communications with somebody.
Anyone else want to comment on that? Before I move on to the next question? Casey,
I would just say that health is first. It really is. Like, you cannot be, and I say this is just on a human level, not on a human level. All of the money in the world will serve you no good if you are not yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and emotionally. And so if you really are in a toxic environment, which is impeding your ability to live a sane, joyful, productive life, when it's spilling into your home life, spilling into the way you interact with your family members, your friends, at some point you just have to call it quits. We do not want you to die for the cause, because we need your brilliance. And we need your beauty. So we need you to be alive in the cause so that you can contribute your gifts to all of these wonderful efforts. And so if it is getting that bad, it is time to leave. And I would piggyback on what everyone else said in terms of the documentation. Make sure that you are documenting it as you go along, because indeed the way that we change things is by engaging in advocacy and very often legal action. All of it we've seen recently with respect to people getting fired after their racist incidents go viral, it's not a coincidence. I've spoken to people at the various financial firm that Amy Cooper was working at, They had investors calling up saying, if you don't get rid of her, I'm no longer investing in you, right? We live in a new age. And when companies see, or when institutions see that they get sued and they lose their pants basically in a lawsuit for racial discrimination, they change. And so there's no need for you to die. There's a need for you to be alive and to advocate. And so leave if it is really impeding your mental, physical, emotional health.
Yes. Go ahead, Casey. Speak to that.
I can really speak to that because the district I worked at before Washington, D.C., ironically, I met the library director at a conference, had his card, and when I was ready to jump, I made the call and he said, I'll make room for you, just come on. So I settled my job situation, but I just want to go back to this, is that how important it is that you know yourself and you set your parameters for yourself. I am the forever optimist. I'm always willing to try, and I put my faith in the work that I do every day. And I remember the biblical verse that, please God, please forgive them because they know not what they do. I constantly say that to myself, but at some point, sometimes, it's just not working. You do have to separate. Now, last district, I had to separate because it was such a toxic environment where I was receiving microaggressions and racial microaggressions from Black and white folk. And I said, no, this is a bit much. Can't do this anymore. And also, too, you're not going to mess up my good name in this here streets. I worked too hard. So I had to get out of there before I lost my patience and I got to cussing somebody out. Now, I'm a Christian, but I'll cuss you out in a minute. But the thing about it is that you got to know what your parameters and your level where you say, okay, this is enough. Because if you continue to go, it's going to go mental and you're not going to be of any use to anyone in the future.
Yes, thank you. I have a comment. Someone put in the chat, sometimes your environment is toxic, but you get so much joy in the work that you do that is what keeps you in that situation. I would like to add that the stomach is the second brain. And if you find yourself with constant stomach issues, just because you're still in that toxic work environment because you feel as though you have an affinity to something, there's always some other work that's going to give you joy. It's always, people talk about your passion versus your purpose. Okay, you can be passionate about something, but that might not be your purpose. And the purpose is sometimes things fall apart. As Chinua Achebe in his book famously says, things fall apart. And sometimes you just have to take a step back to get a step ahead, because being uncomfortable all the time is not a good feeling. But it's always good to be uncomfortable some of the time. But if you're in a work environment that you wholeheartedly feel is so toxic and that it's demeaning, what will happen to you is that it will weigh on your health. And as a Black woman, I can tell you this, and I'll share my stories. I'm always sharing my stories. I should write a book about it, but I endured stress, and I held my stress so tightly in my gut that when I had a fibroid removed, it was the size of a small soccer ball. So I'm going to tell you that stress, the stomach is the second brain, and stress will take you out of here. If it don't take you out, it definitely spelled backwards equals desserts. And that still takes you out, because desserts spelled, stress spelled backwards desserts. And eating all that coffee, eating all those coffee cakes and all the sugar still damages your body. So again, what I would ask the question is, what is your health? And how much value do you put on you, on your internal well-being, that you would rather stay in a toxic work environment than to take a step out on faith and move on someplace else and find your purpose and your passion?
Exactly. Because when I left, I was a branch manager, and I started out as a children's librarian, and my ultimate job was to be like children's coordinator, children's service coordinator, something like that. Somebody else had the job, and I didn't apply because I didn't believe in the management. And so, it took me several years to get to a point that I was like, I'm done. And I've worked myself in that location, that system. And, people are like, when I left, people were like, how do you leave being a branch manager to be a school librarian? And I'm like, the wonderful thing is I had a mentor, little did they know, who worked for AFPL, which is Atlanta Fulton Public Library, who she did the exact same thing. She, and it takes forever to be a manager there. And she was there for like 20 years and became a manager, and it was just not conducive to her health. It was not conducive to her schedule. She has a child, and she was like, I need to make a move. And it was the best decision of her life. And I've watched her do that. And so because you have mentors, because you are active in professions, you see people, you know, come across somebody, and we have stuff like this. You, like you said, Michelle, you step out there on faith and you just say, look, I got to do what I have to do. And that's what I did. I mean, it's the best decision of my life, because now I can run programs the way I want to run programs as a children's, you know, not a children's librarian, but, you know, school librarian, and do what I want to do. And I didn't realize like I would have had this type of freedom, but I had to have some things happen. I had to move up for me to be able to step out there and do what I need to do. And I mean, I've gotten on more, I mean, I got on executive board because I was a school librarian. So, and I know that. So it's like saying it was a great transition, because I don't believe that it necessarily would have happened regardless of who I was at ALA. They needed a school librarian. And I mean, I literally within months I was fresh, and I keep telling, I'm new, but I used it. School librarian, you know, 2 months in, you know, you got to do what you have to do. But when it becomes toxic and you're no longer happy to go to work, when you driving to work trying to figure out, you know, how much leave you got, you know, and you putting in leave requests a month or two, you know, every week you got to take off, and you just exhausted on your leave because you just can't get up. You just want to be in the house and watch TV. It's time to go, because your attitude changes. Because I know I knew it was time for me to go when I sat in the branch managers meeting, and a white colleague was talking about calling the police on students who were supposedly truant. And I said, you know, if you're scared of these kids, why don't you get an ally, somebody else in the library who can speak to them instead of calling the police? You don't know why they're in the library, but because they're Black kids and it's 12 o'clock, you assume that they're cutting school instead of having a conversation and realizing that they're actually seniors, and they get out of school at 12 o'clock on certain days. And I mean, I just remember just being very upset and not caring that we were in a professional, you know, environment, and just being like, I gotta go, because the next meeting ain't gonna be this nice if I gotta continue to work with y'all.
Well said, well said, well said. So we are winding down. Please keep putting the questions in the chat. We have about another 13, 15, 16, 17 minutes left. So I have a question for you. We talked about microaggression and how it affects you physically and psychologically. Does anybody else want to elaborate on that, or I can just move on to my next question? Because, you know, we need to talk about our mental health. We need to talk about how, you know, Black women mental health, just Black in general, mental health, and how we don't take care of our mental health. But microaggression definitely is something that will harbor and linger and cause a whole lot of other things if you don't deal with it. And, you know, deal with it in the moment. You might not be able to deal with it, but deal with it over time and look back and reflect. And Amma gave out some great things. Journaling, yes, journaling, yoga, meditation, anything to find your happy space. Self-love, self-love, self-love. That's what I can talk all about all day. So how can we promote self-awareness and manage microaggressions without chilling our speech and dialogue? In other words, curb your tongue.
I really appreciate that, because I think that unfortunately, some of our allies and even some of us have come to a point where we're just so afraid to speak, and speaking is exactly what we need to do. So I think I would like everyone to just have the fundamental understanding, and I'm repeating this again because I think that it's so important. We all engage in microaggressions. And this is not something that we are going to solve. So I gave the story about saying to my colleague at a law firm I was working at, you know, fellow lawyer, you know, who's the lucky lady? I made a similar, you could call it a microaggression. A friend of mine was doing free yoga classes for mental health during this quarantine time. She had been inviting me for 10:30 yoga every morning. I wasn't able to go see it, so I was never seeing her on Zoom. All of a sudden she says, this is the last time because I'm having a baby. Now I haven't seen her in a long time. I email her back, congrats on having this baby. This is an opportunity to assist God in a miracle, wishing you a safe delivery. She then replies, Amma, your email made my day. I'm not physically having a baby. I have a surrogate. I didn't know, right? I had been seeing her, I hadn't seen her on Zoom. I didn't know. And again, an assumption. The assumption is that when a woman says they're having a baby, the assumption 9.9 out of 10 times is they are physically having a baby. So again, I say this to say we all make these mistakes. And so you have to be ready to, one, engage in dialogue, but two, apologize when someone brings the misconception, the stereotype, the unconscious bias to your attention, and be willing to learn, because every time it happens, you are now aware, and so you change your speech later on. So now I am more cognizant of the fact that if someone says they're getting married, it may not be someone of the opposite sex. My language is changing. We have to be willing to be uncomfortable to engage in that growth. So again, speak, engage in dialogue, be ready to apologize, and be ready to be aware, mindful, and change your speech.
I can,
Well said. Go ahead, Casey.
too. Between the period of 2015 and 2017, I don't talk about my experience in the school district because it was a very toxic environment. I don't talk about it very much because it is painful, but this is what I will say. Sometimes when you are working in a really toxic environment, you have to be strategic and find ways to bring yourself personal joy. And also, in my case, I didn't want my reputation as a school librarian that I worked so hard to build to be tarnished by the opinions of small-minded people. So what I ended up doing is I created my own digital footprint that this district cannot touch. There are circulation statistics that show that all the work that was done during that time, and you can Google it and you'll figure it out. All the work that I'd done during that time that was substantial. I also allow, and I'm very sensitive about allowing people to publish works with my name in it because people make money off my name, and I and I don't like that. So I allowed one woman to include me in a chapter of her book, and then I wrote an op-ed, and I had an interview that was done for me. Now, these are high level things that I'm explaining to you, but I created some things in place for me, for personal satisfaction, that I knew I did a good job, but I also want to leave an indelible bookmark digital footprint that they cannot touch. And I think that's important when we exit left out of some of these crazy work environments, that you have to leave something behind you that says that I was a Black woman and I did this and I made a difference. So just a little food for thought, because like I said, them jokers can't touch none of that work I did because it will be there, and I own the I'm in the driver's seat holding the keys. So try me.
She said, try me. Dr. Walker, you have anything you would like to add? Because you keep this group balanced.
So I was thinking about what Amma was saying about some of the microaggressions that she has committed, and of course we've all committed them. I think it's great value in having diverse relationships with people, because what it does is it develops a sensitivity in you to what they encounter. And so you learn through those relationships. So for example, she shared an example from a colleague who was marrying a man. And I'm sure based on that experience, she has she's more sensitive to that, or she's more sensitive to different types of families, different constructions of families. I just think there's great value in building diverse networks. And when you care about someone who is marginalized or someone who's different, it's going to develop that sensitivity in you, not just for them, but for other people who identify similarly. So when you hear someone misgender an individual, or when you hear someone who disrespects a different type of family, I think you become more invested in that dialogue and that conversation, and making sure that that behavior just doesn't proliferate.
Okay. So we have a question here. It has to deal with microaggressions. Juanita asks, What about microaggressions from other? This term I struggle with. I just can't assert to it, but I'm going to say it for the panel, BIPOC. I just feel like, Black, Indigenous, people of color, we are people of color, Black and brown. I'm just not with the BIPOC, but her question is BIPOC. So
I would love to address this question because I actually started on my journey through a microaggression by a person of color. So I have a law degree and a business degree and was working at a law firm and then working at Citi as in-house counsel when something happened to me, a microaggression. I have a 10-year-old son and a 7-year-old son. At one point, I took the 10-year-old, he was 3, I took him to a barber shop and I asked the barber not to shave off all his hair because barbers love to just shave off all of the hair for fidgety toilets, which is the easiest thing. So I said, please don't shave all of his hair. This is at a Black barber shop on Merrick Boulevard, for those of you in New York, in Springfield Gardens, Queens. The barber, who was Black, who was a Jamaican Black, the reggae playing in the background, started shaving off my son's hair from here. And when I said, hey, what are you doing? Stop, I told you not to shave it all off. I want him to have more style. He said, how can I tell you this? You have a real Nigga right here. He is a native boy. He is from the tribe. This is not pretty hair. This is the best cut for him. This is a Black barber with some sort of process like an S-curl in his own hair, saying that my son's hair was not beautiful, was not pretty hair. He thought he was doing me a favor, saying, lady, this boy's from the tribe. If you thought you had Shamar Moore or Boris Kodjoe or a biracial child, you were incorrect. He is an African boy. This is kinky hair. It should be shaved all off. At the back of the salon, there was a lady who was clearly bleached doing hair. Let's say her face was like Beyonce's complexion. Her hands were like my complexion. This is a microaggression. Yes, skin bleaching. It is very real and very in Caribbean, African, Asian, Latin American cultures, as well as in the United States to a certain extent. So he had a common understanding. Kinky hair equals bad hair. That here is that understanding exists among Black people, white people, a number of different people. The next day I was watching The Fashion Police with the late Joan Rivers, and she made a comment about Solange Knowles at the Great Gatsby premiere. She said, Solange Knowles looks nice in her dress and everything. And at the time, Solange had a big afro. She said, I like afros just as much as anyone else, but not to the red carpet. So she was saying afro here was not red carpet worthy or dress up worthy or sophisticated hair. So I say this to give you all hard examples of microaggressions by people of color, because we have been indoctrinated with the same brainwashing, the same hate speech, the same white superiority, the same Black inferiority and of color inferiority complex. So again, I'm admitting this to you all. In that moment, I did nothing. I even gave him a tip. There was no saving the haircut, right? It was cut here. So you couldn't do a fade, you couldn't do a mohawk. I did nothing in that moment except feel sick to myself and took time to process it, and then started writing children's books that affirm African identity and so forth. So I expressed it through my art. So that's one thing you can do. You can express it through your art. But again, every experience gives you another vantage point. So then when it happens again, you are better able to tackle it. So when the same son was doing chess class with a Black old Southern professor, and he's like, why are you coming in my class with your peasy hair? Boy, this is what he was saying to my son. Afterwards, I took him aside when everyone was finished with chess, and I said, we believe in nappy hair in my house. We believe it is an affirmation of our African identity. And he said, but you can't go into the corporate world like that. I said, he's 8 years old and he will be fine. So I'm giving you rich examples from my own life to tell you we have to deal with it within our own community. And I believe it has to be a very holistic approach. So that's why I write children's books. That's why I publish books. That's why I promote children's books by people of color that give these different perspectives. We need to create in the art making, we have to promote diverse perspectives, as well as in the moment sometimes or after the moment, engaging in the sort of conversations within our own communities to be able to de-brainwash and inculcate people with better values that are more conducive to inclusivity for all.
Well said, well said. I want to be mindful of our time, ladies. We have 6 minutes left. And I do have one question that we have prepared for the panel, which is, what work do non-POC need to do? So I want to phrase that a little bit better. What work do we all need to do to combat microaggression? Not just non-people of color, but what work do we all need to do?
I would
It's
say
it's
definitely things like this panel is a great way because we're giving examples, we're giving solutions. You know, I think Rebecca put in the list of tools that we could be using, and discussions like this, and then we can get Alma to do some presentations at some universities and workplaces. Get her some money. I mean, like we got to keep talking about it. We have to keep talking about it, not be afraid of it, not feel any type of way about it. And just like we have sexual harassment every year, every 2 years, we need a microaggression class. We need a race matters class or whatever, all lives, black lives, blue lives, whatever you want to say. We need classes and we need workshops. I'm tired of sexual harassment classes every year, every 2 years. I do believe we all know what it is. And I do believe we know what steps we need to make to file a case, but we don't know how to file a case when somebody has offended you, So we need the workplace. I hope it's some HR people here. Like the workplace it has to start there. And if we can't get the workplace, then we have to do it at conferences and do it at every conference, whether not, not just ALA, not just Black Caucus Conference, not just Reformer, not just JCLC. We need to start, we're librarians, we're resourceful people. We need to be taking this, on the road. We got a bookmobile somewhere. Maybe we take this on the road.
yes, a bookmobile road trip. Okay, so we're gonna be the road warrior librarians, right? Opposed
Shonda can make the t-shirts and get us some book bags.
going to every county with our message. That is a great message. I'm hearing an echoing. I think somebody's open. If you could please mute yourself, we would greatly appreciate it. We have 4 minutes left, and our great panelists, the panelists, you all have done well today. The song is well done, ladies. It is well done. So I want to hear from the other 3 panelists really quickly. What do you?
Sure.
The question is what else can we do?
Real quick, just kind of echoing what Ebony said, like read, educate, learn, expose yourself to different types of people, different information. I know there's probably already been a session on cultural competence, but part of that process is about continuously educating yourself. The work is never done. I also think accountability is important because if there are no consequences for behavior, then behavior will just consider. So we have to be accountable to ourselves, build those values into our profession, into our workplace.
Thank you. Casey Boyd.
I agree. First of all, I got to rip my HBCU, Southern University A&M College in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Don't start, Ebony. Anyway,
TU.
read. I'm going to bring the school system into this. Brother Glennie Singleton wrote Courageous Conversations About Race. It's important that Black and white educators and other people of color read this book. It really maps out a lot of issues in K-12 education, and it will help us change some of our practices. Right now, our kids are not engaging because they don't see themselves represented in the literature, in the day-to-day teaching of lessons that take place in these schools. If we were to all come together after reading a great book like this, and I know you can't see it because of my background, this would change our mindset and send us in a different direction so we can reach those kids who have been deemed unreachable. So yes, further reading is important. We are educators. This is something we must do.
Can you put that title in the chat? Someone's asking, can you add that title in the chat of the book that you were trying to hold up? See, that's why I like the little Zoom spaces. Look, I make these. I mean, everyone put a shameless plug. If you want me to make your background, Casey, I got you. And then you don't have to be sitting still in the Zoom. But Ebony, you want one? I have you. I have you. So we are at our last 60 seconds. And this was a great panel. Ladies, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. This was great. I learned so much from each and every one of you. Like I tell my children every day, when you leave out my house, I need you to learn something new every day, because that's what life is all about. Come back and tell me something new that you learn. And if you look at the word learn, you drop up the letter L, we have earn. You drop up the letter N, we have our ears. So we use our ears to what? Listen. When we listen, we learn. And when we learn, we can always increase our earning potential. And on that note, we would like put that in the chat. That just came from God, but I'm trying to get it back together. That just came from the Holy Spirit, but I'll put it back. I'll get it together. I'll email it.
Won't do it. Amen.
Want me to do it all day, all day? It is
Like
1
jump
o'clock.
off this seat and start tap dancing.
Yes, won't he do it? I just want to say thank you to everyone. It is 1 o'clock. We are respectful of your time. NYBLC, please visit our website, the NYBLC. You will find all the information for the rest of the panels that's coming up. We have about 2 more left. This was 4 of 6 in our series. And I just want to say again to everyone, thank you. NYBLC shameless plug. We're having our virtual 50th anniversary gala. Information to be on our website next week. All right. Take care, everyone, and we thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Great panel. Thank you very much.
Peace out.
Now stop that recording before the jokes start.
I know, Rebecca.
I'm here. Stop the recording.